Chapter 11. No. 11. The Sparks of Black. Clang. That wasn't very nice. You could have poked an eye out with that, I said as I slid my katana back into its sheath after deflecting a speeding knife. Standing behind me was Rockman, his face covered in sweat, and a worried and pained expression settled over his face. That expression quickly changed to surprise when he noticed my sudden appearance in the extended back alley path he was running through. He stood stock still as his gaze shifted from me to his pursuer, Stendhal, who was now staring daggers at me from the other end of the alley. Plus 10 SP. You dare get in the way of true judgment, Stendhal said as he reached over to his katana. He unsheathed his dangerously sharp weapon and pointed it toward me in one swift move. You must be this villain's partner. Very well then, I'll be sure to take you both down. Billion. Listen here, Tuxedo Mask. I pointed a finger over at Rockman. I don't really care about or know who this guy is. Then why get in my way? Stendhal hissed, his patience running low. I rolled my eyes under the darkness of my hood and then moved my hand to point at him. Because of you. You see, there's this thing I'm trying to get. And so far, all the clowns I've fought couldn't give me the push I need to get it. You, on the other hand, have some pretty impressive moves. I drew out my katana and held it in both hands beside my head. So what I want from you is a good fight. Nov LB / JNN. Plus 15 SP. Enough of this charade. I'll cut you down and then move on to the one behind you. Stendhal growled out and rushed at me with incredible speed, his katana pulled back and ready to slice me in two. This is my chance. I have to limit myself to only my pure strength, speed, skills, and no curse techniques. I have to push myself to land a black flash. I dashed forward as well, ready to meet my opponent head-on. The clash of metal echoed through the alley as Stendhal and I engaged in an intense sword fight. Our katanas clashed and sparked as we moved with incredible speed and precision. Each strike was met with a swift parry or a skillful dodge, creating a mesmerizing dance of blades. This guy's good. If it weren't for both Yuta's swordsmanship skills and Maki's weapon specialist skills, I doubt I'd last this long. At some point during our fight, Rockman had decided it was time to get the hell out of Dodge and made a break for it, leaving me and Stendhal alone. Stendhal's formidable skills pushed me to the limit, but I matched his every move with determination and focus. Our intense exchange of blows continued, however, Stendhal was slowly gaining ground on me. His bigger size and strength were giving him the edge. It was only thanks to my and my natural strength that I was even able to put up a fight. You're skilled. I'll give you that, Stendhal said as he deflected my horizontal strike. But I'm stronger. Plus 25 SP. Crap baskets. In a move that took me by surprise, Stendhal closed the distance between us and kicked my stomach with his foot. I grunted as I slid back on the ground, only to look up at the descending blade of his katana over my head. Moving on instinct, I raised my weapon above my head and deflected his attack away, causing him to lose balance momentarily. Now's my chance. I let my katana fall onto the ground as I prepped my into my right fist. Stendhal looked down at me and jumped back just as I was about to land a enhanced punch at his stomach. Shit. As he moved away, he threw two knives at me with precision and speed. I raised my right arm and used it to block the knives from stabbing into my torso. With a wince, I ripped them out and threw the knives at the ground. How foolish. You've abandoned your weapon in hopes of hitting me with your fist. Perhaps you're not as skilled as I originally thought, Stendhal said as he leaned forward. Now then, it's time for evil to be cut down. Plus 15 SP. Stendhal, with his razor-sharp katana, moved right at me with incredible speed, aiming to strike me down while I was unarmed. I glared at him as I narrowly dodged and weaved away from his non-stop lethal strikes with calculated and graceful movements. It was taking everything I had to not get sliced or skewered with every attack Stendhal executed. Despite my efforts, Stendhal's formidable skills were quickly pushing me to my limits. I was growing tired, and my speed was beginning to drop. Stendhal noticed this and capitalized on my drop of speed. He slid his left foot out and stepped on my foot, causing me to trip up. Swiping his sword diagonally, Stendhal finally managed to land a cut on my body. Seeing my blood, Stendhal smirked under his mask and spun on his hips to cut off my head. His foot was still pressing down on my own, keeping me in place with his greater strength. Shit. Dodge. Dodge, there's no time or space to dodge. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as I watched Stenthal's razor-sharp sword grow closer and closer to my neck. I tightened my hands into fists as I glared at the man in front of me and charged C into my fists. I'm not going to lose to you. I refuse to lose. It was at that moment that I finally felt it. Black. Just as Stenthal's blade was a millimeter away from my neck, I landed a punch straight into Stenthal's face while applying my cursed energy within 0.000001 seconds, causing a distortion in space around both Stenthal and me as arcs of red and black sparked to life. Blash. Stenthal's mask shattered on impact as his body flew back several feet in a violent spin. I winced as a long, shallow, bleeding cut now adorned the side of my neck. Despite the pain, I felt my mind grow clearer than ever before. Plus 100 SP. I understand now, I muttered as I looked down at my hands. I clenched them tightly and looked over at Stenthal. An aura of C quickly grew around my body. It's just like Toto said, all this time, I've just been using C without truly understanding it, like a novice chef using ingredients without any purpose. But now, it's so clear to me. Stand up, Stenthal. Let me show you what 120% of my potential truly looks like. I said as Stenthal finally managed to stand to his feet. His face was profusely bleeding, and his nose was broken. Plus 50 SP. Your conviction is unshakable, Stenthal muttered as he held his bloody face with his hand. He was swaying where he stood as his knees shook. He then raised his hand to show off a bloodied knife. But this fight ends here. I watched in confusion as he raised the knife to his mouth. In an instant, my eyes grew wide in realization. No way, are you minus a long tongue slipped out his mouth and gave the bloody knife a long lick. Gah. I felt all control of my body leave me as I collapsed on the floor in a heap, causing my hood to fall off my head. I tried to move, but the most my body would do was tremble in exertion. Despite that, I spun my head to glare over the man who would one day be Stain. Well, you bastard. What the hell? What's Stain doing here dressed like that? Did I miss his backstory or something? Stenthal fell to one knee as he looked over at me with a shocked expression before it turned into a wide, bloodthirsty smile. You have potential, child. That is why I will not extinguish your light today. Our fight has taught me many things. I'm sure we will meet in the future to finish today's battle. Farewell. Plus 100 SP. I watched helplessly as Stenthal turned around and walked away slowly with a wobble until he disappeared into the darkness. I continued to try and move my body but found the task to be impossible. Blowing red scale. With my technique active, I slowly pulled my hood over my head and began to push my body up. As I moved, it felt like each of my limbs was strapped to 226 kilogram weights, making the normally easy task of standing a Herculean task. Damn. Now I have to wait for his quirk's effect to wear off. Just great. Chapter 12, No. 12, Hidden Inventory. You have pulled Itadori Yuji's pain tolerance. Rank, Silver. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. I watched as the small plastic prize ball in my hand slowly shimmered away once I received my reward. In an instant, the slight pain on my still healing neck had become a lot more bearable. With enough focus, I pushed the pain to the back of my mind as if I wasn't even hurt at all. Even so, the injury still stung. I was sitting in my small room, loose papers and art supplies strewn around, as two laptops sat on my desk. Unlike usual, there were no clones slaving away today. The reason was the large stack of manuscripts and a year's worth of weekly chapters sitting in several folders on a cluttered desk. Safe to say, I was extremely ahead of schedule. I was even in the negotiating process of selling the first entries to both Harry Potter and Star Wars. It wouldn't be long before my name blew up in this world. Well, at least my pen name. Use 700 SP. I said as I twisted the Gacha's dial. After a few seconds, a new prize ball popped out of the machine. I hated to admit it, but I was now thoroughly addicted to gambling away my points. Hopefully, my new addition stayed to this gacha machine and not to the blood-sucking casinos this world has to offer. It killed me at times not to go all in, but I knew I had to be careful with my points. Otherwise, I'd keep hoarding more useless junk from the JJK world. It got to the point that I had to rent an entire storage unit to store all my useless junk. I already had 10 pairs of Gojo's sunglasses. I didn't need more. Even if they were from a designer brand. You have pulled the inventory curse. Rank, Silver. Say what? I watched with curiosity as cursed energy began to gather in the space in front of me from seemingly nowhere. After a few seconds, A purple worm-like creature appeared in the air. Before it could fall on the ground, I caught it in my arms. So I can win cursed spirits as well. Neat. Does that mean I can pull Rika as well? I said as the worm-like cursed spirit looked at me with a derpy expression. Now then, are you loyal to me, or what? The cursed spirit nodded as if it fully understood me. I grinned and lifted it close to my body so it could wrap itself around my torso like it did with Toji. Awesome. I'm going to call you Zeiko. Yup. I patted Zeiko's head with a smile, causing the spirit to hum. Zeiko it is. I walked over and reached under my bed to grab my only two weapons, Kusakabe's katana and Slaughter Demon. I lifted them towards Zeiko's mouth and watched in fascination as he swallowed them both easily, causing them both to vanish seemingly. I then reached into its mouth and pulled out Slaughter Demon. Now I can always walk around with my weapons. How convenient. You wouldn't happen to have Toji's arsenal, now, would you? I asked Zeiko. The spirit looked confused and shook its head. You don't know who Toji is. I wonder if this gacha system clears your memories when it brought you here. This only begs the question of whether you were Toji or Gito's spirit that I snatched, or if you're an exact copy made by the system itself. Before I could think any deeper into the possible mechanics of my gacha system, the alarm on my phone went off. I reached over to my desk and hit the snooze button on my phone. Today was the day I would finally meet my editor for my TMNT manga. She had been pestering and repeatedly asking for an in-person meeting after the sudden rise of my story's popularity. Apparently, communication over email and texts wasn't good enough for her. Without wasting any time, I quickly used my remaining 5 pulls. Sadly, I didn't win any more decent rewards, just a bunch of more useless junk like Moa's black tie and Miguel's funny hat. Let's get a move on, Zeiko, I said, walking out of my room to begin walking through the orphanage's hallways. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a pair of round sunglasses to place over my eyes. Hopefully, this won't take too long. XXX. General point of view. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air as Mikami Asuka, a red-haired woman with blue eyes dressed in a yellow cardigan jacket and black khaki pants, sat at a cozy corner table in the bustling cafe. She watched as the barista expertly steamed milk for her latte, creating a mesmerizing swirl in the cup. The gentle chatter of other patrons provided a soothing background noise, and the warm glow of the afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting a golden hue over the entire space. Asuka took a moment to savor the tranquility of the cafe, which was a welcome break from her usual hectic days. She took a sip of her latte. The rich, velvety flavor danced on her taste buds, bringing a contented smile to her face. And /o/bell/b/jn.c//om. Asuka had been working in the manga industry for the past 2 years now, so her experience in the field was somewhat lacking. Despite that, she was hungry and desperate to secure her spot at the top of the industry. This meant she had to find the next big story to shake the manga world. That was easier said than done. Even after 1 year of searching and interviewing several hopeful future mangakas, Asuka came up empty-handed. All of the stories and one-shots she's seen were generic and boring. There was nothing new and fresh. Nothing that would catch the reader's attention. That was until she received an email from someone by the name of Jej. This wasn't unusual by any means. Asuka's email was constantly receiving messages from wannabe artists who wanted her to take a chance on them and their works. But the message she received from Jej was different. His message was short and to the point. Read this and let me know when we can start. Jej's message was one of extreme confidence. Some wouldn't be remiss even to say a bit egotistical. But when Asuka took a look at the attached files, she couldn't help but be unimpressed with the art quality. The drawings were decent, but nothing impressive. But they didn't have to be. No, what stood out like a star in the sky was the story. The tale of 4 mutant ninja brothers who fight against evil and protect the innocent from the shadows as unsung heroes was attention-grabbing. It was also the very story she's been in search of this entire time. Asuka wasn't like most people. Most people wanted to see larger-than-life heroes performing grand heroic feats while looking handsome, beautiful, and human-like. It wasn't a giant secret that the media didn't like to show off those with mutant-type quirks. No, heroes like Gang Orca, Wolfman, Super Snake Woman, and many more pro-mutant heroes weren't exactly pushed to be on the front pages or main time slots on television or movies. Even in today's day and age, people still can't differentiate between those who look different and monsters or villains. However, a story like the one of the Turtle Brothers could be the push to help society change. Even if it's a small push. So Asuka instantly agreed to take on Jej and submit his story to Jump. The bigwigs in charge almost didn't accept running the story, but Asuka wasn't one to give up so easily. She pushed and pushed the bigwigs until they agreed to give the story a shot. And to everyone's surprise, except her, Jej's story was an instant success. The readers couldn't get enough of the tales of the 4 Ninja Turtle brothers and their rat father. Week after week, each edition of Jump had massive sales, a large part due to Jej's story. You can also imagine her shock when she found out that Jej was also a writer as well. He has written the recently awarded New York Times bestseller The Hunger Games. Asuka had asked to meet Jej on several occasions, but the mangaka was adamant about maintaining their communication over the internet or by phone. But after working alongside him for several weeks, Asuka wouldn't take no for an answer anymore. Fine, we can meet at this cafe in Musitafu then. That's how Asuka ended up in a lovely cafe in the city of Musitafu. Her face was eager and impatient to meet the man who did so much in so little time. Glancing around, Asuka noticed a group of young teenagers engaged in lively conversation at a nearby table, their laughter adding a cheerful energy to the atmosphere. The aroma of freshly baked pastries wafted from the display case, tempting her with their decadent sweetness. It's almost time. Where is he? Asuka asked as she took another sip of her drink. Lost in her thoughts, Asuka failed to notice a young black-haired boy dressed in a black hoodie and white shirt as he looked down at his phone and then at her repeatedly. With a shrug, he walked over and sat in the chair opposite of her nonchalantly. Noticing the weird kid sitting in front of her, Asuka raised an annoyed eyebrow at him. Hey, kid, you lost or something? Listen, I don't have time for you. Can you go bother someone else? Kid. Lady, I'm 12. So, a kid, Asuka said with a sigh. She then made shoo-shoo motions at her uninvited guest with an eye roll. Do you want some money or something? Here's 500 yen, now go away. The youth wearing sunglasses took the bill with a shrug and slid it into his pocket. Still, he didn't move and stared at Asuka with a slight grin. The red-haired woman slowly began to feel an odd feeling from the kid in front of her. Almost negative. This caused Asuka to slowly slide back into the back of her chair. Her reaction caused the black-haired boy's grin to stretch wider in amusement. I have to go now. Asuka muttered as she began to gather her stuff to leave the table. Really? The young boy said in an amused tone. I thought you wanted to meet me, Mikami-san. In an instant, Asuka froze and turned to him with slowly widening eyes. Jej. As sensei. In the flesh. A few moments later, a long, hushed, high-pitched whine filled the cafe. Chapter 13, No. 13, A Bitter Pill. The city of Musitafu was a special city. It was your run-of-the-mill city located in the Shizuoka prefecture. Around a 2-hour train ride from the orphanage I live at. However, there were several key locations ripe with potential points waiting to be made within Musitafu. Locations like Midoriya's apartment, Takoba Municipal Beach Park, Tatooine Station, the Todoroki household, Oldera Junior High, and finally, UA High School. But I wasn't here for any of those locations today. No, I was here to visit my old fellow orphan and friend. Ace Keiko. This must be it. I looked up from the GPS on my phone at the impressive-looking 2-story home. A bag of fancy cookies in my right hand. Oh, not bad. Zeiko grunted from his spot on my shoulder as it also looked over the house. My amusing meeting with my editor, thankfully, only lasted 2 hours. Asuka was a rather fun person to mess with. Unsurprisingly, my young age had thrown her for a loop. While watching her stutter and apologize for being rude was funny, she recovered quickly, and we both got to business. She had tried to sneakily impose some story beats and suggestions for my story, as all manga editors try to do, but I quickly shut that shit down and told her what my plans for my story were. Asuka was surprised that I only had so many chapters in mind for the duration of my story and that I didn't want it to run for years on end. Asuka immediately tried to dissuade me from this due to the sheer popularity of my story. However, when I mentioned that I had another story planned once TMNT was done, she quickly changed her tune and peppered me with questions. This version of Japan wasn't ready for Dragon Ball Z to drop. This one's for you, Toriyama. Your legend will live on in this uncultured world. What do we got here? I stepped forward and read the nameplate by the house gate. Yoshiguki, it read. I reached out and pressed the doorbell on the house's stone gate pillar and waited. As I waited, I looked over to the house next door, where a black crow was perched on its roof. I nodded at Crow Megumi, causing him to nod back. From my calls over the years with Keiko, she had told me that her new family was apparently super wonderful and friendly. They had been very supportive and loving of her. I was happy for her. I truly was. She was a sweet girl who had gone through hell very early on. She deserved some happiness. It wasn't until recently that she insisted I come and meet her family. Something I had been pushing off for as long as I could. Not because I didn't want to. Of course not. No, it was due to how busy I've been lately and my nightly escapades. But Keiko had finally had enough and all but ordered me to come today. Stubborn woman, child. Su-chan. Keiko ran out of her front door and swung open the front gate of her house to jump into my arms. She had a large smile on her face as she tried to squeeze the life out of my body. You're here. You're finally here. You've gotten taller. +5 SP. Calm down, Keiko, I said with a small smile, causing her to laugh. You'll crush my gift. The excitable blue-haired girl jumped back and looked down at the blue bag in my hand. She then grabbed my other hand and dragged me towards her home. I can't wait for you to meet my mother and father. I'm sure you'll love them. They're so nice, and they even let me decorate my own room however I like. Oh. I want to show you my room. Easy there, girl, I said as I patted the top of her head in an attempt to calm down her high levels of energy, just as I did during our time at the orphanage. Let me meet your new folks first. Haha. Sorry. I'm just so happy to see you again. Keiko softly said as we stopped by the front door. Her yellow eyes gazed at me with fondness. I missed you. +5 SP. I kept still and stared at her in stumped silence. A soft, warm feeling grew around my chest. What I felt wasn't romantic. No, this feeling was something else. It was hard to describe. It was nice. I miss Minus. Keiko-chan. Is this the young man you've been talking about nonstop? My eyebrow twitched in annoyance, and I turned to look at a middle-aged couple standing by the door. The man had well-combed brown hair with a light build. He was dressed in casual clothing well suited to being at home. The woman beside him had black hair pulled into a low ponytail. She wore a pink blouse and a long yellow skirt hung down her legs. The couple looked away from their daughter and flinched when their eyes met my own. It seemed that they were able to quickly pick up the negative energy I was producing. Usually, it took most people a few minutes of being around me to notice. You must be Suta. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, young man. Keiko here has had nothing but wonderful things to say about you. Keiko's new mother said with a smile, seemingly getting over any of the feelings she felt about me. My name is Yoshiyuki Hana. And this here is my husband, Yoshiyuki Kenta. It's a pleasure to meet you both, I said with a slight bow of my head. It wouldn't do me any good to be disrespectful to my friend's parents. +5 SP. +5 SP. Wow, I've never seen you bow to anyone, Su-chan. How rare. I can be respectful. I just choose not to. You've grown up so much, Su-chan. I'm so proud. You do know I'm older than you, right? The Yoshiyuki couple chuckled at our conversations. On the other hand, was taken aback. It seems that Keiko has grown rather bold ever since she left. I missed the little girl who hid behind me whenever we had people over. Her newfound confidence was both surprising and amusing. Now then, why don't you two kids come on in? We wouldn't want the snacks Keiko worked so hard to prepare to go to waste, now do we? Mother. Don't tell Su-chan that. +10 SP. XXX. Keiko's room was a cheerful and cozy space. It perfectly reflected her vibrant and bubbly personality. After talking and getting to know Keiko's parents for around 40 minutes, I came to the conclusion that the Yoshiyuki couple were good people. Unlike most people I come across, they barely had any traces of negative emotions. Something I was able to pick up pretty easily, thanks to my abilities as a sorcerer. The two of them truly loved and cared for my friend. A fact that put me at ease. Still, I would continue having Crow Megumi watch over her. Just to be safe. Once the Yoshiyuki couple were satisfied after asking me a multitude of questions about myself, they let Keiko and I go up to her room per her request. The walls were painted in a soft shade of sky blue and adorned with colorful posters of her favorite anime characters and bands. A large bookshelf stood against one wall, filled with several children's books and trinkets. A comfortable bed with a bright floral bedspread sat in one corner, accompanied by a plush All Might toy. The room was illuminated by fairy lights strung across the ceiling, casting a warm and inviting glow. A small desk, littered with art supplies and sketches, occupied another corner. Sitting on a chair was the All Might themed sweater she had received all those years ago. Overall, the room exuded a sense of joy and individuality, perfectly capturing who Keiko was. "You sure went wild with decorating your room," I said as I walked over to her desk, where several sketches sat. They were rough drawings of female hero costumes. Each one of them had detailed notes of what each article of the costume did or what it was made of. Seeing them caused my amused smile to melt away. With my back turned to her, Keiko nodded happily and threw herself on her bed. +5 SP. Yeah. Isn't it wonderful? I have it all to myself, and I don't have to share it. Keiko froze in her excited chattering and turned to me with a sad, regrettable expression. "I'm sorry, Sue-chan. I didn't minus. +5 SP. It's fine." I interrupted her as I sat down on her bed to lay beside her. "I don't need any parents anyway. I'm incredibly self-sufficient, didn't you know?" "I know. But still. I feel like I'm bragging when I show off my room and my parents." "Ah? Why did you hit me with my own pillow?" "Because you're being stupid," I said as I turned to her with a grin. "I'm happy you're happy. So don't worry about little old me. I'm doing just fine." +10 SP. Keiko remained silent and brushed her fingers on the bandage on my neck. "Then what's this? Are you still getting into fights?" "No." I sat up and looked over at her desk, where all her hero costume sketches sat. "I see you still want to be a hero," I said in order to change the subject. Keiko quickly sat up and covered my eyes with her hands. "I thought I told you that was a bad idea." "No, don't look. I'm still working on them," Keiko said with an embarrassed blush as I chuckled. "And, of course, I still want to be a hero. After all, I want to be just like All Might. I want to save people from danger with a smile like he did when he saved me." I grabbed her hands and removed them from my face with a sigh. Standing up, I walked over to her desk and placed a hand on her hoodie. Being a hero was something she always talked about when she still lived with me at the orphanage. Then again, that's pretty much what every kid talks about when they're young and full of dreams. However, unlike most kids with weak and lame abilities, Keiko's quirk actually had some potential. Her quirk was called Loving Shield. Loving Shield allowed her to summon barriers or walls of blue energy capable of blocking anything as strong as her. What powers her quirk is her abnormally high levels of positive emotions. However, if her happy emotional state gets disrupted or shaken, her energy barriers will grow weaker or break. At the moment, her quirk is rather weak due to her young age and inexperience, but with enough time, I knew that her ability had the potential to grow to be rather powerful. "Do you think I can't do it?" Keiko asked shyly, her hands on her knees as she looked down at her pink carpet. Her usually bright and happy yellow eyes were now dimmer. I once again found myself sighing and brushed back my hair. "It's not that. You know how I feel about heroes. It's a dangerous profession, Keiko. +5 SP. I know that. But I know I can do it," Keiko said with a grin, her previous shyness gone as if it was never there. She then clapped her hands like a certain blonde alchemist and held her palms to me. I watched as a barrier of blue energy half her size burst to life in front of her. "See? I've been working really hard on my quirk. Try and get through it like before. It's true. This is a lot bigger and solid than before." I reached out and placed a hand on the barrier. Touching it didn't hurt or burn me. The only thing I felt from touching it was a nice, cool feeling. Slowly, I began to push the barrier with my natural strength. The barrier didn't budge. I then tried again with my C and saw the barrier begin to shake. Seeing that, I stopped pushing. Not bad. The last time I did this, my hand was able to push through it as if it were made of jello. +5 SP. Haha. Keiko smiled and released her barrier in favor of placing her hands on her hips. "See? I've gotten a lot stronger. I'll definitely be a great hero someday. And /o/bell/b//in.c//om." Images of destruction and mutant humanoid creatures popped into my mind. A light blue-haired man with the power to crumble anything he touched crept up behind Keiko and slowly began to reach out to her face, ready to decay her to dust. In a few years from now, Keiko will probably be in the same year as Midoriya when he joins UA. If she does make it in, will she be placed in 1A? No, I doubt it. At most, she'll probably make it to a general education course like Shinso. As long as she stays away from class 1A, then she won't be at the heart of everything. She'll be fine. I wanted to tell her to quit. To give up her dream of being a hero. It would only get her killed. She wasn't part of the main cast, and that meant she didn't have any plot armor like the rest of class 1A. Keiko could very well die as one of the background characters. But if I told her to give up now, would that be fair to her? Was I really going to risk our relationship based on my paranoid what-ifs? Yeah. You're right. I forced my face to smile at her as I wrapped the All Might themed sweater around her shoulders. You'll definitely become a great hero someday. I'm sure of it. Plus 20 SP. Keiko looked at me with wide, happy eyes before wrapping her arms around my shoulders as she laughed and jumped. I was glad that her face was pressed into my shoulder. It meant she didn't have to see the frown on my face. Chapter 14. No. 14. Meet the protagonist. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the city of Musutafu, I found myself walking through its bustling streets to get my mind off my earlier talk with Keiko. The fading light painted the buildings around me in soft hues of pink and gold, creating a mesmerizing backdrop for the silhouettes of different-shaped people going about their evening activities. As I walked, my mind was busy thinking back to the events of today as Zeiko gurgled on my shoulder. You'll definitely become a great hero someday. I'm sure of it. The words I said to Keiko continued to replay in my head. I couldn't help but wonder if I made the right call to tell her that. But the large, bright smile she gave me dissuaded those negative thoughts of mine. Bucking softy. After a while, I grew tired of the busy streets and changed course to stroll through a nearby residential area. I gazed up to see a canvas of pastel colors, with wisps of clouds catching the last rays of sunlight that made up the sky. Boom. I turned my head to the sound of a hushed bang that sounded like an explosion. Curious, I began heading in the direction of the sound. As I grew closer, I was able to hear the fading sounds of laughter. Finally, I came upon a small neighborhood park and saw a green, bushy, haired figure looking down at a smoking notebook standing at the center of the park. My eyes grew wide as I watched an 11-year-old Midoriya Izuku pick up his charred notebook with a sad expression on his dirty, teary-eyed face. Holy crap. It's Sheep Boy. I mean Izuku. Izuku sighed and walked over to one of the swinging chairs on the swing set. With a sigh, the boy took a seat and slowly swung back and forth. He was so lost in his little world that he had yet to notice me at the park entrance. Seeing my opportunity to interact with the main character of this world, I walked over to the swing set and took a seat beside him. You know, I suddenly said, catching Izuku off guard. You shouldn't be playing with fire here. Plus 10 SP. Oh. No. I wasn't playing with matches or anything like that. Izuku squeezed his ruined notebook nervously as he looked between me and it. This was because. Easy there, kid. I'm not gonna tell on ya. I chuckled and began swinging back and forth. Zeiko gurgled in glee as the wind stroked its face. The name Suta. Shimizu Suta. Kid. But you don't look that much older than me. Izuku muttered and then perked up, suddenly remembering his manners. Ah. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you, Shimizu S-san. Just Suta is fine, Midoriya. I swung lazily and smiled at the soon-to-be nervous wreck. So, why did you ruin your notebook? You got some dirty stuff in there or something. Plus 10 SP. Izuku's face burned bright red as he quickly shook his head. What? No. Nothing like that. It's just my hero notes. Ooh. Hero notes. You mind if I take a look? Plus 20 SP. Izuku pressed his lips together and seemed unsure of what to do. In the end, he nodded meekly and tentatively handed me his ruined notebook. I looked down and saw the notebook's title, Hero Analysis for the Future Number 5. I smiled, seeing one of his famous notebooks in person, and began to flip through the pages. Despite the notebook's ruined cover, the pages within were still in pretty good condition. Pages and pages of detailed notes and drawings on heroes of old and new filled the book. It was pretty impressive. Especially considering he was still around 11 years old. Wow. This is some pretty impressive stuff, Midoriya. I said as I looked up at his surprised face. Really impressive. You got some analysis quirk or something. Plus 30 SP. Holy so much. Is this the point potential that comes with interacting with the main cast? Ah, no. Nothing like that. I just really love heroes, so I pay a lot of attention to them. Aha. Izuku looked away from me with his hand on his neck, his body tense. It's sorta like my hobby. Nov LB / JNN. He thinks I'm going to make fun of him. I looked away from him and flipped through a few more pages to eventually find a large section dedicated to All Might. Dang, he hasn't even started middle school yet, and he's already like this. That's so. Then what's your quirk? I said with an expectant look and watched as he froze. His green eyes shifted back and forth to look anywhere else but at me. Plus 30 SP. I'm quirkless. Izuku softly said in a small voice with his eyes tightly shut. Despite my issues with the Midoriya Izuku from the original series, seeing him in person and acting in such a way left a bad taste in my mouth. I couldn't help but be reminded of my little brother from my past life. He and Izuku were pretty similar. Izuku jumped slightly when I placed my hand on his shoulder. I see. Well, that makes two of us then. Izuku's eyes grew large at my revelation. Because I'm quirkless as well. Plus 100 SP. Oh really? Izuku shouted as he jumped to his feet. I mean, it's just that I haven't met anyone else who was quirkiness. I didn't mean to be rude, Shimizu-san, I mean, Suta-san. I chuckled at his reaction and waved his worries away. It's fine, Izuku. I get it. At least now I know why you were acting like a scared kitten. People can be pretty mean to us just for not having powers. I then held out his notebook and stood up as well. Is that why your notebook got burnt? Someone pick on you. Plus 20 SP. No, Kacchan was just. He lost control of his quirk. That's all. Oh. If you say so. I said with a tone that told him I didn't buy what he said, causing him to look away. We may be quirkless, Izuku, but that doesn't mean we're worthless. You want to know what I did when someone looked down on me just because I was born with an extra joint in my dumb toe? Intrigued, Izuku turned back to me and looked at me expectantly. I kicked his ass. You what? Plus 40 SP. This kid's reactions are hilarious. Oh, yeah. I flexed both of my arms and grinned at him. He had this quirk that gave him the ability to make any one of his limbs super strong. He thought that made him better than me, so he thought it was a good idea to smack my lunch on the ground while his little friends laughed. Unfortunately for him, I stood on business and slammed him onto the ground. Sure, I got suspended for 2 weeks, but that shit stain never bothered me again. Plus 30 SP. And no way. You really managed to beat somebody with a quirk. I can't believe it. Izuku said with an amazed look as he furiously scribbled into his notebook. You said his quirk let him increase the power behind any one limb, correct? Just how much power could? Well, one thing is for sure, Izuku is definitely a quirk nerd. I shook my head as Izuku muttered away theories and ideas based on my short description of Watch His Face's quirk. I rolled my eyes at him and grabbed his shoulder to stop his muttering. You're missing the point here, Izuku, I said and took my hand back. What I'm trying to tell you is that just because we're quirkless, it doesn't mean we should just let those with quirks walk over us. Kinda like this Kacchan asshole who burnt your book. It's not like that. Kacchan is my friend. Really? Plus 30 SP. This kid sure is delusional. No wonder he turned out the way he did if this is how he thinks now. Fine, fine. If you say so, broccoli boy. I then pointed over at his notebook and smiled. Quirk analysis for the future. That means you want to be a hero, right? A hero. Izuku whispered. His eyes were both hopeful and downtrodden. Quirkless people can't be heroes. Right? If this was a shonen anime, which it is, this is the moment I give Izuku the words he's been waiting to hear ever since that dickhead of a doctor told him he was quirkless. Hopefully, all those hours of watching Naruto will pay off now. Eraserhead, Sir Night-Eye, Midnight, and several other heroes mainly use their hand-to-hand skills and hard-earned strength to be heroes. Sure, they have fancy quirks that help them do their jobs, but that's nothing some impressive support gear can't cover for. I said as I looked down at my feet and racked my brain to find the right words to say to this sad little boy. I was never the best at giving speeches or talking. So, I hope that I was making sense of his overthinking butt. So why not? Why can't you be a hero? As long as you put in the work and train yourself to the bone, I don't see why not. Don't let those losers or anyone else put you down, man. I mean, look at this notebook of yours. It's some impressive stuff. Plus 200 SP. Ka-ching. Maybe I'm not so bad at talk no just do after all. Do you really think so? Izuku whispered, large tears swelling in his eyes. Can I truly be a hero, too? Sorry, All Might. I'm stealing your line here. I need them points. Appa needs himself the limitless. Yes, Izuku. You can be a hero. Plus 500 SP. Congratulations on earning 500 SP in one go. You have unlocked a new tier. The Platinum Reward tier. 3,500 SP will allow you to pull one time for a 50% chance to pull a Platinum tier reward. I ignored Izuku's little sobs in favor of looking at the new system screens in surprise. Slowly, a large, hungry grin grew on my face as I turned to Izuku. Looks like I just found my new golden goose, my new friend. Chapter 15, No. 15, Stolen Street Cred. You have pulled Ryaman Sukuna's poison immunity. Rank, Gold. Oh, an excellent pull. Indeed. A very useful passive. Gentlemen, I believe it's time. I looked around at my 4 clones as we all sat on a random round table I found on someone's rooftop balcony. Zeiko sat on my shoulder as usual. A pair of Gojo's shades rested over its derpy eyes. We were all dressed in my Jujutsu uniform as we looked at one another with varying expressions. You mean the platinum pull? Clona said to Clone B as he intertwined his fingers and leaned forward on the table. Oh, a high-risk, high-reward pull. It's a risky option. Ah. What are you? Pussy. I say we go all in. Clone C slapped his hand on the table as he leaned back on his chair. So what if we lose all our points on the off chance we don't pull a reward? What life without some risk? You sound ridiculous. We have a better chance at pulling for a gold tier reward. At least with that, we have 4 chances to win something. Not just one. Clone D shook his head as he crossed his arms. My expression was set in a look that said, I can't believe we're having this conversation. Boss. I say we go for it. Clone B abruptly stood up and turned to me with a large smile. I say we do it. This could be our chance to get one of the 4 techniques on our wish list. Just think about it. We have a 50% chance of pulling the Limitless, the 10 Shadows, Shrine, or Star Rage. Let's become op. I hummed as I looked out at the night sky. The city lights in the background shined brightly. Perhaps even encouragingly. You all had strong arguments and sound points. With all your opinions in mind, I've come to a decision, gentlemen. I say we go for the platinum pull. 2 out of the 4 clones cheered while the other 2 sucked their teeth in annoyance. I reached forward and grabbed the floating gacha machine's dial. Use 3,500 SP. I slowly twisted the dial as my clones stood behind me, their faces nervous but excited. We watched as the machine rumbled and glowed a bright silver as the plastic prize balls danced enticingly behind the machine's glass case. None of us breathed as we watched the lid finally snap open to reveal. You have pulled Fushiguro Megumi's curse technique, the 10 Shadows. Rank, Platinum. Yes. We did it, boys. We made it. I never doubted this choice for a second. Stop the cap. Suddenly, several loud bangs shook the door behind us as we all stopped our celebration. We all turned to look at the door I barricaded with a chair. Who the hell is out there? I'm calling the police. A loud, angry man shouted as he continued to bang repeatedly on his door. Shit. No time to experiment, I said as all my clones melted away into sea. I spun on my heel and jumped off the roof balcony as the old geezer continued to yell. Leaping from rooftop to rooftop, my face broke into a grin as I raised my hands to make a hand seal of a dog. Divine dogs. 2 loud howls filled the chilly night air as my mad laughter followed behind them, causing dozens of once happily sleeping people to wake up in annoyance at the loud noise. XXX. General point of view. A man with long black hair looked around his surroundings with dry but calculating eyes. He was dressed in a black jumpsuit with a utility belt around his waist. On his feet were black boots, and a white rope-like cloth sat coiled around his neck. The man's name was Aizawa Shota, otherwise known as Eraserhead. Any idea on what happened here, Eraserhead? Aizawa turned to look at another fellow hero who had a black mask over his eyes and an attire similar to the armor Spartans would wear, including a green hooded cape and a black shirt that appeared to be stitched down the middle with a red pattern. This was the pro-hero, Crust. A few, Aizawa muttered as he looked around the large, dark warehouse. The abandoned warehouse Aizawa, Crust, and several police officers stood within loomed large, its weathered bricks crumbling and stained by years of neglect. Rusting metal beams jut out at odd angles, while shattered windows create a haunting mosaic of jagged glass. The air is thick with dust and blood, and the faint smell of mold lingers, hinting at the dampness that has seeped in over time. Inside, the vast open space is filled with remnants of its former life. Rows of empty shelves and scattered debris litter the cold concrete floor. Sunlight streams through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows that dance across the walls. Graffiti tags splash colors against the drab interiors. However, what stood out the most in the warehouse were the several bloodied and bruised criminals strewn around everywhere, with even more outside being treated by first responders. Slowly, okay. I got him. Aizawa turned to see 3 police officers slowly bring down one of the unconscious men onto the ground. The man they had retrieved had been hanging upside down with a rope attached to his legs from one of the rafters above. Crust nodded in approval at the officers' teamwork and walked over to one of the large tables at the center of the warehouse. Stacked neatly on one another were several bags of narcotics and stolen support gear meant for heroes. Standing around the table were 2 officers taking inventory and pictures of the gathered contraband. Grabbing a bag full of colorful pills, Crust carefully inspected its contents before looking over to Aizawa. Ecstasy, Crust said before placing the bag back. Seeing that all this stuff is still hanging around, I'm guessing this is the work of vigilantes. Possibly, Aizawa said as he crouched beside 2 empty duffel bags. He reached into one of the bags and pulled out a 10,000 yen bill. A deal gone wrong, then. If this was vigilantes, they made off with 2 or more bags full of money. Erase her head, Crust. One of the police officers, a woman with brown hair tied into a ponytail, said as she walked over to Aizawa and Crust. One of them just woke up. Aizawa and Crust turned to one another and nodded before following the officer. The 3 walked out of the warehouse, where several ambulances were parked and paramedics were treating the recovered criminals. The man had deep green skin and blue eyes. His hair was extraordinarily spiky and non-kept, matching his loose attire. The man was covered in bruises and even bite marks resembling that of a large dog or wolf. Demon. It was a demon. The green-skinned man muttered in fear as he trembled. He then to the 2 pro-heroes with almost a manic gaze. That thing came out of the shadows and took us all out. Slow down, Aizawa said as he raised his hands to try and calm the erratic man down. Take a breath and calm down. Now, explain what happened here tonight. Who attacked you all? The man held his head as his eyes began to tear up in fright and trauma. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go down, man. We were supposed to make the deal and get our money. But then that thing showed up and defeated us like we were nothing. The man said as he closed his eyes as if to keep away the mysterious boogeyman. And that laugh. That demon was laughing as it attacked us all one by one. Like this was a game. And /o/bell/b//in.c//ohm. Aizawa and Crust exchanged disturbed glances at each other. The nearby officers and paramedics, who were listening intently, began to grow concerned as they listened to the man's story. Did you happen to get a name? Crust said softly, not wanting to frighten the scared and traumatized man any further. The man froze and turned to him and whispered. He called himself Sukuna, the king of curses. XXX. Shimizu suit a point of view. There's one fundamental rule for interacting with others. You know what that is, you pile of dorks. 13 times 5 equals plus 65 SP. I threw another chip into my mouth and looked down at the pile of bodies composed of middle schoolers. They all wore the same school uniform as me, but unlike me, theirs were dirty, bloodied, and even smelled of piss. The pile of students, some mutants and some not, beneath me all groaned and moaned in pain while a purple-haired student opened one of his unbruised eyes as he struggled to breathe from under me. What are you going on about, you quirkless ga? Plus 5 SP. Shh. I'm doing a thing here. I said as my right fist found a new home in his stomach. Now, where was I? Ah, that's right. The one fundamental rule for interacting with others is a simple one. I won't kill you, so in return, please don't kill me either. Substitute any word for kill. The point is drawing a line so you do not infringe on others. In order for both to exist together, they need to honor that. Or something like that. Do you guys get it? Not really. I thought he was quirkless. How is he so strong? I see can't breath. I sighed and threw the half-eaten bag of chips at its original owner's face, who happened to be at the bottom of the pile that acted as my meat throne. Yeah, me neither. Sorry, Megumi. I failed you. I stood up and climbed slowly down the pile of middle schoolers. Once I was back on the ground, I looked over at my creation and took a picture. Now, a sight like this would have normally brought attention to the surrounding student body. Thankfully, we were all on the south side of the school, away from all prying eyes and teachers. How did things end up like this? I hear you asking. Things 1, 2, and 3, from where I helped out Watch His Face a while back, had a bone to pick with me from when I slapped them silly. So, in retaliation, they gathered up a large group of their scummy friends to teach me a lesson. It was a brief and easy lesson. It took all of 3 minutes for me to kick all their asses without sending them to the hospital. Hopefully, they're quick learners, so I didn't have to do this again. Oi, you 3. I pointed at the 3 bozos from before, causing them all to whimper loudly. Why yes. The 3 shouted. +5 SP. +5 SP. +5 SP. This is your last warning. Mess with me again, and I'll rip your balls off. Oh, also, don't mess with that guy anymore, either. Ka whatever, too. You mean, Kagawa. Yeah, him. In fact, I better not hear you 3 or any of you in that pile bullying anyone in this school. Got me. I said in a raised voice as I lifted my pristine knuckles at the large pile of middle schoolers. We understand. The loud, scared reply came from them all. 13 times 5 equals +65 SP. I nodded and walked away from the meat pile to begin heading to work, unaware of the several hidden onlookers watching from their hiding areas. As I walked, I wondered how long I would continue working for Minato. Money wasn't much of a problem anymore due to my book sales and recently acquired bags of cash, so there was little point in working for the low wage Minato was paying me. But if I did quit, then May and I would have less time to hang out or for me to earn some SP. Oh, what to do? I walked straight through the crowds of city folk, their bodies parting the way like the Red Sea. Confusion and nervousness were across their faces as they turned to me as I passed them. Fuck it. I'll keep working there. I owe Minato for the chance after all. I nodded as I reached the street where Hatsume's mechanical repairs and such was located. Yeah, that's the reason. It's not because I enjoy being around the crazy tornado that is Hatsume and not being alone. Yeah, the cope is real. I walked through the store's front door and heard the familiar bell chime. What do we get going on today, Hatsume-san? Minato grinned at me as he looked up from the compound motor he was working on. Ah, Suta. You're here. Hataki-san brought in a deep fryer from his restaurant, which has been giving him trouble. Can you take a minus? Suta. I braced myself as a blur of pink crashed into me. I looked over my shoulder to see Mai's smiling face covered in dirt and grime. It's ready. Baby number 18 is ready. You have to come look. +5 SP. Hello to you too, May. I said as May let me go in favor of grabbing my hand to pull me off towards the back of the shop. Minato sighed and stood in her way, a dirty rag in his hands. Not now, Mai. Suta has some work to do first. Ah. Nah. My baby is so much more interesting than that. Suta is here to work, Mai. Not to help you invent future lawsuits. I resent that. I laughed at the father and daughter duo as they bickered about how I would spend my time today. May and I were so caught up in the moment that we didn't realize our fingers were intertwined. Chapter 16, No. 16, Barking Pomeranian. I lazily moved left and right from the ridiculously slow, uncoordinated punches my green cash cow threw. I had my hands behind my back as I spun to the side and stuck out my foot, causing Izuku to trip forward. Ah! Izuku grunted as he rolled on the floor. This may be harder than I thought, I muttered as Izuku stood up. His clothes were covered in dust and dirt while a few stray leaves from the trees around us poked out from his bushy hair. Up in the tree branches watching us were 3 crows hidden within the leaves. As they watched, their little heads scanned around the area. The green one should just give up. He's got 2 left feet. Now, he'll get it soon. Salmon. I ran a hand through my hair and watched as Izuku patted his clothes. Once he gathered himself, he took a deep breath and rushed me again. As I watched, a lone thought popped into my head. This kid is uncoordinated as heck. Izuku, stop throwing all your weight behind your punches. I looked around the public park we were in and smacked another sloppy punch of his. I then tapped his forehead with my 2 pointer fingers, pushing him back onto the ground. Gah. I'm trying. I'm just not good at this. All Might makes it look so easy. He beats the villains up in one punch. Izuku said as he remained seated on the floor. He then smiled and punched the air. He would just yell smash and bam. The day is saved. Yeah, but he's All Might. He can punch a hole in the atmosphere. I walked over to him and picked him up from the scruff of his shirt like a dog. You, on the other hand, can barely do 10 push-ups without looking like you're about to pass out. Sorry. I sighed and placed my hands on his shoulders. Don't be sorry, Izuku. Be better. Don't sue me, Santa Monica. Nov LB //JNN. Plus 50 SP. Izuku looked at me with wide, awestruck eyes. Immediately, he nodded with renewed vigor and raised his arms into a poorly executed boxing stance. A far cry from the stance I taught him. But hey, he'll get it eventually. You see, for the past month or so, I've taken it upon myself to help my golden goose, my friend, to train up his skills and strength. My goal was to have him be in a much better state than in canon for when he receives All Might's quirk. It's the least I can do. He was the reason I got the 10 shadows. That and I need to earn back my points after losing 7,000 SP on those 2 failed platinum pulls. Who knew my luck would run dry after that first pull? Damn, gotcha. You unforgiving bitch. Okay, let's take things slow. I stepped back and placed my hands behind my back. This time, focus on your footwork and balance. Just keep up with me, and don't worry about landing a hit. Just stay on your feet, and don't let me trip you. Got it. Got it. For the next half hour, Izuku's performance has taken a turn for the better. This time, he focused his attention on staying on his feet and maintaining his balance. The times he did begin to lose his focus, I simply smacked his face lightly to bring back his focus. We continued on like this until his relatively short stamina finally ran out. With Izuku panting on the ground, I strolled through several trees to the area where I had left the red cooler I had brought and grabbed 2 water bottles. As I closed the cooler's lid, Crow Maki sent me a vision of 3 newcomers approaching Izuku and my location. Walking towards us were Bakugo and 2 of his followers. Oh. It seems it's time for me to finally meet that headache. Thanks to Crow Maki, Crow Inumeki, and Crow Panda, who was a crow and not a panda, I always had a clear view of my surroundings thanks to their overwatch. Those 3 made it almost impossible for anyone to sneak up on me without some sneaking quirk or super speed. What the hell? Deku. The hell are you doing out here? Kei-Kachan. Wow, it really is Deku. That's what I get for choosing the local public park near Izuku's apartment. I rolled my eyes and walked back to where I had left Izuku and found the spiky-haired, somehow fan favorite, angry Pomeranian himself. Bakugo Katsuki. Oh, and his 2 cronies, too. My opinion of Bakugo Katsuki from the original series was that I didn't like him. The guy was an asshole to Izuku just because of his dreams and his quirklessness. The guy even told the green bean to kill himself. Not to mention the way he treats others due to his perceived greatness. And don't give that but he had so much pressure on him to succeed bullshit. That doesn't give you a pass to treat those around you like trash. But to be fair, I would give this Bakugo a chance to prove my preconceived opinions of his main timeline character wrong. Bakugo was glaring at Izuku with annoyance as his hands twitched. Behind him was a long-haired boy with gray hair and droopy eyes, while the other boy had medium-length, unkempt black hair. You following me around? Is that it, Deku? And no, that's not it, Kachan. I was here training. Deku said in a meek voice as he tried to maintain eye contact with Bakugo. The 2 cronies behind the blonde chuckled as they watched Izuku shrink into himself. Training? Don't tell me you still think you can be a hero. I told you that a quirkless nobody like you has no chance of ever being one. So give up already. Bakugo screamed as he got all up into Izuku's personal space as small explosions popped in his right hand. Never mind, fuck this guy. Kachan, I-. Okay, I walked out from behind the tree I was standing behind, surprising the 3 newcomers. That's enough, you barking Pomeranian. The hell did you say? Bakugo yelled as he ignored Izuku and stomped over to me. He was trying to look intimidating, But seeing an 11-year-old throw a tantrum was anything but intimidating. Who the hell do you think you are, you extra? Yesh. This is grating. Kachan, wait. He's my minus. Shut it, Deku. I'm talking here. Izuku flinched as Bakugo turned to him with an annoyed, angry scowl. I rolled my eyes at Bakugo's constant screaming and rubbed the side of my head. Man, you're so damn loud. Why is that? You hard of hearing or something? I said as I walked over to Izuku and held out the water bottle in my hand. Izuku looked down at the cool beverage and accepted it numbly. Bakugo was stunned that I seemingly ignored and insulted him at once. Get lost, will ya? My friend and I are working on some stuff. Now shoo. Plus 150 SP. Plus 120 SP. Plus 10 SP. Plus 10 SP. The two cronies at the back looked stunned and turned to one another in silent disbelief. Izuku was looking back and forth between Bakugo and me with large, worried eyes. What's with these kids? They're treating Bakugo like the grand poobah. I grinned as the sounds of repeating pops and cracks rippled behind me. I looked over to Bakugo and saw his face burn red with rage as his eyes shrank into slits. You bastard. I'll kill you. Bakugo dashed toward me as fast as he could with his right arm outstretched. His palm was glowing with small explosions as he swung. Smack. You know, kid. Using your quirk on others for no reason isn't allowed. I said as Bakugo's face was half turned while a red handprint rested on his cheek from my slap. Slowly, he turned to look at me with wide, unbelieving eyes. What's the matter? Cat got your tongue. Plus 100 SP. Growling in rage, Bakugo ran right at me with both arms flying forward, palms pointed right at me. Wham! Bakugo blinked as he stared up at the trees and sky from his spot on the floor. This is weirdly cathartic. What's just happened? The boy with long gray hair whispered as he and his friend stood frozen in place. The messy black-haired boy shook his head and rubbed his eyes. I blinked and then Bakugo-san was on the floor. Kachan. Izuku uttered as he stared at me and Bakugo in a delirium. It was as if he was watching something that couldn't be possible. Hey, Kachan. You white. I looked down at the blinking blonde with a large, mocking smile, my hands in my pockets. How does it feel to have been beaten by someone who's quirkless? Technically speaking. Plus 170 SP. What I had done was perform a quick and easy over-the-hip toss on Bakugo in the blink of an eye, making it seem, to the untrained eye, as if Bakugo somehow just teleported on the floor. Quirkless. You. Bakugo muttered as he slowly stood to his feet. Quirkless. Quirkless. He raged as he glared at me with fury. As if I would get beaten by some quirkless loser. Plus 200 SP. Let's see, here we have someone with an okay quirk that can make explosions, I said while pointing at Bakugo with a lazy smile. I then pointed at myself. And here, we have a quirkless nobody with no potential. There's no way I could have beaten you. Isn't that what you're thinking? I walked a few feet away and held my hands up with a lazy expression. Come on, boy. My two hands are all I need to wrangle you. Die. Bakugo dashed toward me with rage-enhanced speed as his hands glowed from the accumulated sweat in his palms. Just as he was about to fire an explosion at point-blank range at my chest and face, my hands flew up and grabbed his wrists. Pushing them outwards, his built-up sweat exploded beside me uselessly. Even after he released his explosions, I held his arms firmly in place in my vice grip as he tried to pull away. Seeing the kid jerk around like a trapped animal, I felt a pang of sympathy for the young kid. See? I said with a calm expression. I leaned in close to his stunned face and whispered so only he would hear me. Learn from this, Bakugo. If you keep looking down on everyone else, you'll never be able to see your own weaknesses. I leaned my head back and smashed my forehead into his own. Bakugo grunted in pain and fell onto his butt as his hands flew up to hold the growing welt on his head. Ag. Plus 200 SP. Don't worry. I was careful to hold back. With my piece said, I cracked my neck and walked over to Izuku. Let's call it a day, Izuku. How about we go for some ice cream? My treat. I wrapped my arm around the stunned Izuku and led him out of the park after I grabbed my cooler. All the while, a frozen but enraged Bakugo stared at our backs with unreasonable hate in his eyes. His two friends. Followers. Whatever theory were were too nervous and scared to say a thing and merely kept as silent as they could. Chapter 17, No. 17, Playing Hero. General point of view. The old loading dock stood as a testament to years of bustling activity, its weathered wooden beams telling stories of countless shipments and deliveries. A faded sign hung above, its once bright letters now peeling and barely legible, hinting at the dock's long past glory days. Rusting metal fittings and heavy chains lay scattered around, remnants of the machinery that had once clattered with life. The air was thick with the scent of salt and aged wood, mingled with the faint aroma of oil and the ghosts of cargo that had been stacked high. Moonlight filtered through the gaps in the corrugated roof, casting streaks of light across the dark, cracked concrete floor. Pockmarked walls bore evidence of time's relentless march, with streaks of moss creeping in where rainwater had seeped through. A few scattered crates, long forgotten, sat in the corners, their once bright colors dulled by the passage of time. Oh whoa. Not bad. A large, pot-bellied man grinned as he looked inside one of the parked vans beside one of the loading bays. Sitting within the van were 10 young children with their limbs tied together with rope. Their mouths were covered with tape while their eyes were covered with blindfolds. A very nice group tonight. Great work, as usual, Okuma-san. Okuma, a woman dressed in a two-piece business suit with long black hair and green eyes, smirked as she walked over to the other van. I aim to please, Satoshi-san. There are so many desperate parents in a rush to begin their kids' hero careers that they'll more than be happy to hand them over to a hero recruiter. Okuma nodded to the two men standing beside the back doors of the other van. One of the men nodded and opened the back door to reveal another group of bound, scared children. Seeing this, Satoshi laughed and stepped inside the van to inspect the children. The bound children were all shaking in fear as they sniffed and cried underneath their bindings. Satoshi stepped in front of a young brown-haired boy with dove-like wings on his back. The man then brushed the boy's wings slowly with a malicious grin. And /o/bell/b// Yes, very nice. I think I'll give this one a run before we turn them in. Satoshi said lecherously, causing Okuma to look away in discomfort. Remember that these kids bring in more profit if they're pure, Okuma said nonchalantly. Yeah. It's fine. It's been a while since my last one, so I'll eat the pay cut. Satoshi said as he licked his lips. With a chuckle, he stepped out of the van and closed the doors behind him. Alright. I'll take it from here. Satoshi pulled out his phone and tapped its screen. A soft ding pinged from Okuma's phone as she watched a large amount of money be deposited into her secured bank account. I'll let you know when the next batch is ready, Okuma said as she turned away to begin walking over to her parked Honda across the street. Alright, boys. Let's get moving. I want to get to Hokkaido before morning, Satoshi said as he turned to look at his two men only to find them missing. In an instant, all the surrounding street lights that illuminated the area exploded. What the hell? Where the fuck minus? Crack. Satoshi jumped back in fright as Okuma's body fell directly in front of him from above, causing her to yell in pain as her right leg was snapped to the side. The woman screamed as she lifted herself up to look over to Satoshi. Ah. Help him minus. Piercing blood. Satoshi's mouth opened in a silent scream as Okuma's head burst into a gory mess as an impossibly fast line of blood pierced through her skull. Satoshi took several steps back but then froze when the two thumps echoed behind him. The pot-bellied man, against his better judgment, turned to look behind him. There, lying on the ground with their bodies ripped to shreds as if they were mauled by a pack of dogs, were his men. How many? A low, dispassionate voice said from behind Satoshi, causing the man to jump. Satoshi watched in fear as a dark, hooded figure slowly emerged from the shadows. How many kids have you taken? I don't. Satoshi struggled to say before the hooded figure swiped his arm up. Two incredibly swift lines of blood flew through the air and stabbed through Satoshi's knees, causing the man to yell in pain and fall to the ground. The hooded figure then pulled his arm back, and the two lines of blood retracted into his jacket sleeve. Whatever. It doesn't matter, the hooded figure said as he walked over to the bleeding Satoshi. The figure reached down and took Satoshi's phone. The pot-bellied man pushed himself up as the hooded figure nodded over at nothing. Satoshi blinked in confusion and looked back at his attacker. Do it slowly. But. Drag him far away. I don't want the kids to hear, the hooded figure said and turned away. Satoshi was left confused, but he suddenly felt his arm explode in pain. Ah. He looked over to his arm as several bleeding puncture wounds covered his skin. A sharp, jerking motion then pulled him to the ground as his body was quickly dragged along the ground by an invisible force. Gah! What is this? Let me go. Satoshi turned his head back to the hooded man's back as he crouched next to the bodies of his men and Okuma. Without warning, their mangled bodies exploded into bright flames. The fire didn't last long because their bodies were reduced to ash in a few seconds from the intense heat. That was all Satoshi saw before he was dragged around the corner towards the pitch-black entrance of one of the loading dock's abandoned electrical rooms. The door then slammed itself closed, stifling Satoshi's bloody screams of agony. XXX. Shimizu Suta point of view. All done. I looked down at my divine dogs as they ran over to me from around the corner. They barked and nodded at my question as I looked down at the ugly man's phone. Good. Now then, what should we do with these kids? I walked over to both of the parked vans and pulled open their rear doors. Sitting inside both of the vehicles were around 19 or so kids. Each of them tied, blindfolded, and gagged. I stepped back to look around the old loading bay and shrugged. I reached into Zeiko's mouth and pulled out one of my many burner phones to dial the police. Hello. So, there's 2 vans full of kidnapped kids in the old loading dock by Toyohashi City. My name. Sorry, can't give you that. Just send several of the boys in blue here, okay? I hung up the phone and crushed it into pieces. The sounds of whimpering and silent crying grabbed my attention as the kidnapped kids leaned on one another for comfort. There were children ranging from 6 to 10 years old. All of which didn't seem to have any mutation-based quirks, with the exception being the small boy with wings on his back. I looked around the area and saw that there weren't any traces of the violence that had just happened. Which was good, I didn't want to traumatize these kids. Alright, kiddies. Let's get you out of there. Over the next 5 minutes, I helped each of the kids out of their binds and took off their gags and blindfolds. Throughout the process, I slipped off my hoodie in favor of wearing my black Spider-Man mask. I didn't want to risk these kids recognizing me after tonight. My divine dogs were off in the background, keeping watch in case any more of the kidnappers' crewmates showed up. Once they were free and off the dirty old vans, the group of kids all looked around with fear and anxiety, which was fair. We were in some dark old loading dock with no light. One of the children, a little girl with bright blonde hair, walked up to me nervously. You mister. Are you a hero? The little girl asked, gaining everyone's attention. A hero. I said as I crouched down so I would be at their eye level. I suppose, from your perspective, I am. 3 times 19 equals plus 57 SP. See, I told you a hero would save us. Yeah. We'll get to go home soon. My words caused a domino effect as all the kids visibly relaxed at the implication I was a hero. They all began to chatter happily and surrounded me to ask dozens of questions. The little blonde girl in front of me sighed in relief and smiled at me widely. Thank you for saving us, Mr. Hero. The little girl said. I'm Haru. I didn't ever give up hope that a hero would come save us. Yeah. A hero. Mr. Hero, your costume is so cool. What's your hero name, mister? Okay. I held my hands in front of me in an attempt to calm them all down. Take it easy. My hero name. Well, I don't really have a hero name. But you kids can call me Sukuna. How's that? 3 times 19 equals plus 57 SP. Such a cool name. A boy with short, gray hair and an All Might shirt said as he jumped up and down. How did you find us, Sukuna? They all grew quiet and waited for me to answer with smiles. Haru had walked closer and grabbed my left hand with a curious expression. Might as well play the part. At least until the police get here. You see, I was patrolling the streets in a nearby city and heard your cries for help. I said in a boisterous voice, similar to All Might. I ran straight here in a flash and took down the evil villains. They all ran away crying at the sight of my power. My claims caused everyone to cheer and yell in excitement. They showered me with praise and asked questions about what my quirk was or if I knew any other pro-heroes. I laughed and indulged in their little questions for several minutes before the sounds of approaching police sirens could be heard. We all looked over to see flashing red and blue lights glow behind the loading dock's main building. Okay, kids. I stood up and brushed some of their heads gently. You all have to wait here for the nice police officers to take you all home, okay? Ah. Aren't you going to stay? A young boy with brown hair and dove wings, his name was Okikatsu, said with sadness, causing everyone to whine and plead with me to stay. Please stay, Mr. Sukuna. I want to. I really do. But the policemen and women will take good care of you all. Besides, I think I hear more cries for help. You all want me to go save them like I saved you, right? I said gently, causing the children to pout. Thankfully, they understood what I said and parted the way for me to leave. As I began to walk away, I turned back and looked at Haru. Haru, keep an eye on them for me, okay? I said with a thumbs up, causing the little girl to nod and return the gesture. +5 SP. I will. Now go save the day, Mr. Sukuna. I smiled behind my mask and made a show of powering up before leaping onto the roof of one of the vans before jumping onto the rooftops of the loading bay's main building. All the kids waved goodbye as several police cars and ambulances came to a stop several feet away. Dozens of officers poured out and approached the children with worry. Quickly and carefully, they guided the children to the paramedics to be checked and treated. I watched all this go down from the shadows on the rooftop. My divine dogs and crows were beside me as we peered down. I then pulled out the phone I took from the ugly, pot-bellied man and glared at the list of contacts on his phone. My eyes focused on the contact named Boss Man. It wasn't my intention to play hero tonight. Running into these kids had been a coincidence from my usual nightly training routine. From what Crow Nobara found, I thought this was a simple drug deal for me to bust. But it turned out to be so much more. Human trafficking, kidnapping, and other horrible crimes against children were something I detested now and in my previous life. So when I saw that these vans held several tied-up children, I acted and executed all these rabid dogs without mercy. My actions tonight had stopped Haru, Katsu, and all the other kids from disappearing and falling into the darkness of human evil due to the agendas of money-hungry degenerates. But seeing this long list of contacts on the corpse's phone, I knew that this wasn't the end of their operation. No, this was just the tip of the iceberg. I was no hero, and I knew that. But that fact just made what I was going to do next even easier. Let's go hunting. Chapter 18, No. 18, Pink Menace. 2 years later. General point of view. The narrow alley was slick with rain, the asphalt glimmering under the dim streetlights as a middle-aged woman with black hair dressed in a blue raincoat ran. The woman's name was Fujioka Hisoka. Known in the underground world as the Coil, she operated under a veil of secrecy, leaving behind nothing but whispered tales and a trail of chaos. Her background was shrouded in mystery. Some said she was a runaway with a sharp mind and a fierce ambition, while others speculated about a more sinister lineage. Regardless of her origins, she had a talent for slipping through the cracks of society, always one step ahead of the law. Her expertise lies in cunning heists, drug trafficking, embezzlement, murder, and human trafficking, especially involving those with children with promising quirks. With a quick wit and a calm demeanor, Hisoka navigated the complexities of the criminal underworld, forging alliances and manipulating rivals to serve her purpose. Despite her darker traits, she was incredibly loyal to her boss. Hisoka would never do anything to put him at risk or capture, even from the infamous demon god himself. The king of curses, Sukuna. The very same demon that was chasing her down like prey. Hisoka's heart pounded in her ears as she sprinted through the shadows. As she ran, she looked back in fright only to see nothing behind her. Despite that, she continued running. Her gray eyes were wide with fear as they looked around wildly. She turned sharply, narrowly avoiding a trash can that clattered to the ground behind her. The adrenaline surged through her veins, propelling her forward. Every breath felt sharp in her lungs. With a grimace, Hisoka crouched low and jumped onto the wall to her right, and springboarded herself back and forth down the alley. Hisoka's quirk, repeated hopping, allowed her to use her legs like coiled springs to jump off nearby surfaces, similar to a pinball, to travel at greater speeds. The scent of damp concrete filled the air as she bounced past a closed shopfront, her mind racing to find an escape route. Hisoka's instincts kicked in. She veered to the right, cutting through a narrow pathway that twisted between two buildings with a long jump. The darkness enveloped her like a cloak, but she knew her pursuer was relentless. She knew once the demon god found you, he would stop at nothing to get you. Hisoka didn't want to end up like all her now dead crewmates. All dead at the hands of that man. Suddenly, she heard what sounded like a crow's caw above her, causing her to look up and momentarily lose focus of her quirk. sending her crashing along the wet ground in a painful roll. Dia. Go on, get up and run. Run. Hisoka quickly crawled to her feet at the sound of the voice. Panic, fear, dread, and many more emotions surged within her. She needed a plan. She needed to escape. I don't want to die. Hisoka screamed in her head. Up ahead, a chain link fence loomed. She leapt toward it, fingers gripping the cold metal. Just as she scrambled over the top, something solid coiled around her left leg and pulled her back. Ah! Let me go. Hisoka's chin slammed on the hard ground, causing her head to swim as the pain of her body being dragged along the rough ground pulsed. Looking down at her leg, Hisoka saw a thick red liquid like rope tied around her leg. She couldn't help but wonder if that was blood. Her eyes followed the rope to its point of origin, only to find a shadowed figure down the alleyway. The visage of the mysterious figure caused a wave of panic through her. It was him. It was Sukuna. The very man who threw a large portion of Japan's underworld into uncontrolled chaos. The killer of criminals and villains alike with no mercy. No. No. Let me go. Reaching down, Hisoka tried to remove the red rope from her leg in a frenzy. Her once well-manicured nails dug into the rope and her skin, but the most she did was scratch and rip her flesh, leaving the rope undamaged. Hot tears streamed out of her eyes as she finally came to a stop. Slowly, she looked up at the pair of cold, amused eyes looming over her. Well, that was fun. Sukuna's low, rough voice said as he reached down and grabbed the top of her head with his gloved right hand. Hisoka whined and fought to remove his hand from her head, but his grip was ironclad. The man, no, the demon before her, then effortlessly lifted her up and held her above the ground, the pressure around her skull increasing. Hisoka whimpered as she desperately tried to remove the demon's hand from her person, but she then made the mistake of looking down at his face in her panic, causing her to freeze like a rabbit. A wide, merciless smile looked at her in amusement as his black eyes peered straight into her soul from beneath the black hood and high white collar. What stood out the most were the sharp, black tattoos that adorned his face. Now then, enough games. Where's your boss at? Oh, and I suggest you answer me quickly. It'll hurt a lot less if you do. XXX. Shimizu suit a point of view. I let out a deep, long yawn as I used my hand to cover my mouth. I then smacked my lips and blearily looked around the empty storefront of Hatsume's mechanical repairs and such. I was wearing my work uniform over a pair of casual clothes, the uniform being a simple black apron. You getting enough sleep, Suta? Minato asked me from his spot on a stool where he was watching a baseball game from the small television set on the far left counter. You know, a young man like yourself needs his full 8 hours to develop properly. Oh, yeah. How many hours of sleep does Mei get? +5 SP. Barely 6. It helps that she doesn't know that the candy she snacks on at night are actually melatonin gummies. Smart. Minato then stretched his back and looked at me with a stern look, like a father would give to their misbehaving son. Still, you should try to get some more sleep. You up all night playing those video games or something? Nah, I was just up late. Studying, I said with a small grin as I pulled out a book from under the counter. Don't worry, Hatsume-san. I'm getting my sleep. Thanks for the concern. +5 SP. Minato smiled and nodded at my answer. He then turned back to watch his game as I read my book. The book was on the Meta-Liberation War. It was actually a very interesting read. There were a lot of points I agreed with within it and some that I didn't. N/O/bell/b/in.c//ohm. Rumble. Minato and I looked at one another as the store rumbled around us. We turned back as a muffled explosion could be heard behind us. I stood up and closed my book while sighing. I got this one. Don't forget the fire extinguisher, Minato said as he turned back to watch his game. Walking towards the back of the store, I grabbed the fire extinguisher from its case and slipped on my outdoor shoes. As I did, I looked up at the large mirror set beside the coat rack to see my reflection. I was now 170 centimeters tall, placing me slightly above average for young Japanese boys like myself. My looks had changed quite a bit as well. This was the result of puberty, alongside my training, nightly excursions, and the constant flow of curse energy within me. Who knew CE had a passive effect of boosting my body? That almost makes up for the fact that everyone I encounter looks at me like a crook or a creep. Almost. My body was well muscled and defined. A few scars littered my body, with the most prominent scar being the one on my neck from my fight with Stain. Fuck that guy. My face and hair looked very similar to Megumi's, and my sharp eyes took after Toji himself. "Gah," Zeiko muttered from over my shoulder, pulling me out of my observation of myself. "Right. May." Soon enough, I reached a large newly built shed workshop located several meters away from the store's main building. I rolled my eyes at the sight of the wisps of black smoke rolling out of the workshop's open windows. "May!" I yelled as I entered the smoking workshop, my free hand waving the bellowing smoke away. "You alive?" "Aha! Success! A major success!" I heard May excitedly yell from somewhere within the smoke. I found myself smiling at her mad cackles and walked over to the right wall where a large switch was located. Flipping it, several load fans came to life and quickly sucked out all the smoke upwards toward the large ventilation system Minato and I built. With the smoke now gone, I took a look around the large workshop with a proud smile. The workshop was a unique blend of controlled chaos, innovation, and, above all, a passion for engineering. As you step inside, you're greeted by the sight of messily organized tools hanging on a magnetic wall. The workshop features expansive workbenches made from sturdy hardwood, each meticulously designed and dedicated to specific tasks, machining, welding, or assembly. Overhead, bright LED lights illuminate every corner, ensuring that even the tiniest detail is visible. Walls are adorned with pegboards displaying an array of tools, from wrenches to calipers, all easily accessible. At the heart of the workshop is a large CNC machine, its sleek design signifying advanced technology. Nearby, a lathe and milling machine stood at the ready, showcasing a mix of traditional craftsmanship and modern innovation. Perfect for crazy steampunk enthusiasts. There is a designated area for prototyping, filled with creative sketches pinned to a board, alongside 3D printers actively producing the latest designs. Adjacent to this is an ample open space designated for testing finished inventions. This area had signs of heavy use, with visible burns and dents from Mai's various tests and mishaps. The air is tinged with the lingering smell of smoke and various materials, metal shavings mixed with the scent of fresh paint coming from the painting booth, where pieces are completed with a focus on both aesthetics and durability. The workshop also boasts a small, comfortable lounge area, complete with a coffee brewer and a large basket full of chocolates, where May would sometimes take a brief moment to recharge her creativity. Off to the back corner was the ever-growing pile of inventions May had created over the course of 2 years. Overall, the mechanical workshop Minato and I built as a gift for Mai's 13th birthday was a pretty impressive sight, equipped for productivity and the creative exploration of engineering. "May, what did your dad and I say about explosions? If you're going to cause one, have the filtration fans on," I said as I placed the fire extinguisher on a nearby table, no longer needing it due to a lack of ongoing fires. There, standing next to the designated area for testing, was May in all her dirt, grime, and oil-covered glory. Her long pink hair was pulled into a high ponytail as her newly made steampunk goggles sat over her eyes. She wore thick mechanical overalls over her lower body while the upper half of the overalls were tied around her waist to expose a black tank top over her upper body. Around her waist was a brown belt full of tools. May pulled her goggles off her eyes and over her head as she turned to me with a giant megawatt smile. "Suta. Look, look. My newest baby is ready." May ran over to me and pulled over to her latest and greatest creation. "Isn't it beautiful? Plus 10 SP. I hummed and looked over the impressive-looking mechanical robot. It heavily resembled Diva's mechanical mech from Overwatch, a game from my original world, in its construction. However, unlike Diva's mech, Mai's was much smaller and had a bulkier design. Despite that, it was extremely impressive. "It's freaking awesome," I said with a smile as I walked around the mech to inspect all of Mai's work. May grinned as she followed behind me with her hands behind her back. "Nice work on the coupling here. I see, this undercut you added will definitely help with the mech's lateral movement." "Very nice, May." We stopped in front of the mech, our eyes locked on the machine's tiny cockpit. "I think this may be your best baby yet. Plus 30 SP. Really?" May said with a large smile. Her cheeks were a tinge of pink. "Absolutely. But I think it can get better than this," I said as I held my chin in thought, my mind whirling. "I think you can improve its design by streamlining the mech's limbs, improving the speed and reducing its overall weight. Yeah, there's definitely more you can do." May nodded along to my suggestions as she wrote down several new notes and sketches on a notepad she pulled from Somewhere. Hum. Yes, I see what you mean. Frankly, I felt I could have done better with the size of my baby's arms and legs, but then I wouldn't be able to include the missiles and booster jets. Mace said nonchalantly as I froze. Aha, you're kidding, right? I said with a nervous smile as I looked at the pink-haired menace I called my friend. She turned to me, her smile widening, but offered no answer to my question. You're kidding. Right? Right? Chapter 19, No. 19, News Bulletin. Keiko, don't stop moving. Izuku, stop overthinking it and follow your instincts. I continued to watch the future #1 hero try and run around a quick-moving blue barrier held up by a tired blue-haired girl. Izuku's calculating eyes followed the barrier created by Keiko's quirk and halted when he found a small opening due to her swaying her arms. I grinned when Izuku leaned down and exploded forward with impressive speed, for him, around Keiko's defense, causing the girl's eyes to widen. Izuku dashed forward with determination and reached out to grab Keiko with his dirty and bruised hands. Take this. Keiko jumped back as she let go of her current barrier in favor of clapping her hands. Izuku tried to correct his course but was suddenly pushed to the side by a fast-moving wave of erratic energy. Good. It looks like you're getting used to using your defensive barrier offensively. I grinned as Keiko fell to a knee due to her tired state, her face covered in sweat. Still, she's using too much energy. We'll work on that. Gah. So close. Izuku slid to a stop from the force of Keiko's attack. His chest was rising and falling quickly as he rested on the ground. Well, you really have an amazing quirk, hey-san. Thank you, Izuku-kun. Keiko smiled tiredly as she tried to stand but failed due to her shaky legs. But I think you're the amazing one here. You've gotten so much faster that it's getting hard for me to keep up with you now. The green-haired nerd's eyes grew wide as an embarrassed blush spread on his face. His right hand was rubbing the back of his head as a true embarrassed protagonist would. That's not true. It's all thanks to Suta-san's training. Otherwise, I wouldn't stand a chance. With a sigh, I stood up from the lawn chair I had been sitting on for the past 20 minutes and walked over to Izuku. As I walked, I passed by Keiko and patted her head, eliciting a small smile from the girl. I thought I knocked that self-deprecating habit out of you, Izuku, I said as I lightly slammed the bottom of my fist on his bushy green and black hair. Don't tell me you forgot. I suppose I can give you another lesson then. Plus 10 SP. And no. Sorry. It just sort of slipped out. Izuku looked panicked as he rose to stand, his hands waving around in front of him. He then looked over to Keiko and jogged towards her. Oh, look. Ei-san looks like she needs help getting up. Yeah. Go run and hide behind Keiko's skirt. But I'm not wearing a skirt. I shook my head and looked around at the rather impressive backyard of Keiko's house. The backyard stretched out like a canvas, wide and inviting, with lush green grass blanketing the ground. Towering trees line the perimeter, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze and providing dappled sunlight in scattered patches while a wooden fence encircles the space. All in all, it made for the perfect training spot for both Keiko and Izuku. Then again, any place where that brat Bakugo didn't pop up was perfect. Looking over toward the green-haired ball of kindness, I thought back to the 2 years I had spent molding and teaching the kid martial arts while strengthening his once skinny body. Due to all that time whipping his butt into shape, Izuku was now a decent fighter who could stand toe-to-toe with any kid in his age bracket in a pure hand-to-hand fight. If someone took a closer look at my ball of clay, they would be able to notice the lithe but strong muscles on his frame, even from under his baggy clothing. I also tried to toughen up his mindset so he wouldn't be such a pushover, but my progress was slow on that front. Additionally, Keiko didn't approve of my bullying, as she called it, severely slowing down my progress on turning Izuku into a confident, ass-kicking protagonist. I smiled as I watched my two friends' students talk excitedly with one another from their spots on the wooden bench they sat on. They were going over their performance in today's sparring session. While they talked, Keiko's mother walked out with a tray of drinks for them with a loving smile. Perhaps your energy reserves for your quirk coincides with each clap of your hands. Have you ever noticed a strain with each clap you do, hey-san? Now that you mention it, I think I do feel a slight pull whenever I activate my quirk. I can't believe I never noticed. You're so smart, Izuku-kun. I introduced Izuku to Keiko around 1.5 years ago when I decided that if I was going to train him, I might as well train Keiko so she would be a heavy hitter if she does get into UA or not. Knowing what future that school had, I'd prefer it if she went to Shiksu. At first, Izuku was extremely nervous at the fact he was talking to a girl, but Keiko's bright and happy disposition quickly melted away his awkward nervousness. Sorta. Fine, it took him around a month or so to talk to her without any issues. Keiko herself accepted Izuku as her friend immediately, which didn't shock me whatsoever. She always had an easy time making friends if going off the way everyone at the orphanage loved her was anything to go off by. It also helped that the two of them coincidentally went to Oldera Junior High. Anyway, while I had Izuku work on his body strength and techniques, I focused on getting Keiko's quirk to level up beyond what she originally could do. Using my rather extensive knowledge of all 12 of my cursed techniques as a base, Izuku and I were able to quickly brainstorm all of the possibilities Keiko's quirk could have. Some of our ideas were moving barriers, vertical and horizontal positioning, floating discs so she could essentially walk on air, fast-moving concentrated barriers to use offensively, and so much more. Keiko had a highly versatile quirk that could be used for so much more than just simple shields. Despite that, getting her to the point of actually implementing all of our ideas was a slow climb up a very steep mountain. So far, Keiko has only been capable of performing moving barriers, vertical and horizontal positioning, and fast-moving concentrated barriers to use offensively. And even that last one was a work in progress. Still, she was slowly growing, and there was no doubt in my mind that my friend would be more than ready for any hero school she got into in 3 years. Training wasn't all the three of us did. We also did the typical activities most young teenagers do as well. Going out to watch movies, wasting time around the local mall, hanging out at one another's houses, except mine, for reasons, and a lot of other activities. All this time spent together caused the two of them to grow pretty close to one another while I tagged along. Having two genuine friends, or an awesome sensei like me, so early on in his life had the added effect of increasing Izuku's self-esteem. Which was a plus in my book. I needed him to be ready for when shit hits the fan in case I'm not around. I would have introduced these two to Mei, but with her personality, she might just ignore them for a few weeks before even bothering to remember their names. Still, I'd give it a go when she finally decides to get out of her workshop. Actually, I'm going to have to force her to go outside, if I'm being honest. Suta-kun. I was nudged out of my thoughts as Keiko's mother walked up to me with a motherly smile and a glass of fresh lemonade in her hands. Would you like a drink? Thank you, Yoshiyuki-san. This is just what I needed. I accepted the drink with a smile and took several sips, causing the older woman to smile. Plus 5 SP. Weren't you sitting around the entire time, Su-chan? Why are you thirsty? Keiko asked as she looked at me with squinted eyes. Izuku tried to look away while covering his mouth to hide the amused smile on his face. Teaching is a hard job that requires nourishment, Keiko. That's why. Oh, is that what you call it? I always thought it was because you were lazy. Keiko said with a large, bright smile. I don't like this new snarky attitude, Keiko. XXX. Mew. Rising from the shadows arose a large owl-like creature with orange feathers and a white mask-like skull. Its large wings stretched and flapped in the wind as two sets of talons stepped around on the rooftop we stood on. Its mask-like face and human-like teeth looked around the area before settling on me. I grinned at the large bird Shikigami and jumped onto its back. Without waiting for a command, Mew flapped its wings and took flight. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Mew soared high above the sprawling cityscape. I felt the rush of wind against my face and hair as we glided across the sky. The sensation of freedom filled my lungs. I'll never get tired of this. Below, the city pulsed with life. Cars streamed along the streets, their headlights twinkling like stars, while the rhythmic hum of urban existence created a symphony of sounds. Skyscrapers reached toward the sky, their glass facades reflecting the fiery colors of sunset. If anyone were to look in my direction, they would see someone soaring through the air in a seated position without assistance. Quite the funny sight. With each movement, Mew and I glided effortlessly, weaving through the clouds that dotted the twilight sky. I gazed down at the parks speckled among the concrete, where small clusters of people enjoyed their evening and distant bridges that connected different parts of the city like veins in a living organism. As we continued on our journey above, the lights below began to blink on, transforming the ground below into a vibrant tapestry of flickering colors. It was a breathtaking view, a moment of tranquility amidst the bustling chaos below. There truly wasn't anything like soaring through the skies. Sure, I could fly like Yorizu did with her bug-like wings using my construction technique. But I liked riding on Mew a lot more. Sitting on my Shikigami's back as it soared through the sky reminded me of how Goku rode on his Nimbus cloud. I was living the dream. Unfortunately, the sight of a large, black dome in the far-off mountains came into view. Mew tilted its wings, and we began to descend toward the black dome or, as I know it, a curtain. My Shikigami and I glided right through the curtain with no issue, and the sight of a large Japanese-style building surrounded by a 10-foot-tall stone wall surrounded by thick trees came into view. Soon enough, Mew landed on the large open courtyard of the property and quickly melted into my shadows after I gave it a thankful pat on its wings once I was on the ground. I looked around my large home and grinned. Yes, my home. I had run into this property a year ago during one of my nightly runs when I tracked down a band of Yakuza I thought worked for the Shai Hasaikai, the organization led by Overhaul. Unfortunately, the group of Yakuza I found wasn't affiliated with the child-abusing assholes and was instead a part of a different group. Oh, that didn't mean that I was going to let these guys go. No, these guys had partaken in several horrible acts such as human trafficking, drug smuggling, child pornography, extortion, weapons smuggling, and assassination. How did I know this? Well, after you torture a few of their captured grunts for a day, they'll sing and tell you anything you want. Not a very heroic thing to do, but what can I say? I ain't no hero. I was simply someone who did as they liked. Whether that be taking out a band of murderous villains or beating a power-drunk hero's face in, it didn't matter. I did as I wanted for my own amusement and interest. This was a mindset I had adopted around a year ago or so. Binding and getting rid of some of society's worst members who conducted some really abhorrent activities can change one's mindset really quickly. I'm not sure when it was when I no longer blinked at the act of killing those who deserved it. It must have been when I found that one rabid dog who called himself a man in the middle of cutting a young 14-year-old girl into pieces after he had violated her for several hours. Shit like that really messes with one's head. And /o/bell/b/jn.c//ohm. Now, where was I? Right? My house. After getting the confessions of their group's crimes from my captured Yakuza members, I found no issue with stepping foot into their property and eliminating everyone inside. Cleaning out all the Yakuza was quick with the help of the 10 Shadows technique and alongside my clones. We struck at the dead of night and took everyone out from the shadows with quick efficientness like ninjas. It also helped that these Yakuza weren't all that strong, too. Sure, there were some of them who had some impressive quirks, but they weren't much help when they weren't given the time to be used. Once everyone was gone, all the compound needed was a thorough cleaning and enhanced security in the form of several well-placed seals, creating 3 strong curtains around the property. I didn't expect the silver tier reward, Ijiki Kayaka's barrier skills, to be useful, but I was pleasantly surprised. Now, if any people approached the barrier without my permission, they would experience a strong sense of confusion and be compelled to turn around and leave. It was a rather simple but extremely strong warding barrier that would keep all those darn kids and the government off my property. And if somehow they did get past the first curtain, there were 2 others ready to ward them away with even stronger defenses. The property itself heavily resembled the one from the Emiya residence from the Fate series. This means that it had several Japanese-style rooms throughout the main household and a storage room in the backyard beside the courtyard. Off on the right side of the courtyard was a well-sized building the Yakuza mostly used for storage that I turned into a dojo. Attached to the rooftops of the main building were several solar panels I created using my construction technique. Something I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't gotten Tsukumo Yuki's C reserves to help power my technique. She wasn't a special grade sorcerer for nothing. This ensured my property was self-sufficient when it came to power. When it came to the water, I effortlessly created a highly efficient water transport filtration system using my mechanical knowledge and my construction technique. So, after hooking up my new filtration system to a nearby flowing river, I now had super clean, free-running water for my self-sufficient house. What about the orphanage? I can hear some of you ask. Surely, I didn't just disappear on them again. I was still a barely 15-year-old kid in their eyes, after all. There's no way they would be okay with me moving into my own home without an adult guardian. The answer to that problem was to send a clone in my place to keep up appearances. What an unlucky fellow. Deciding I had stared at my property long enough, I walked through the back door and removed my shoes. While I may not have been Japanese in my past life, I appreciated the way they didn't wear shoes inside. Kept the floors clean. I walked past the room I used as my library and stepped into my kitchen to grab an apple. On the shelves in my library were several books and manga. Some of these were books 1 to 3 of The Hunger Games, episodes 1 and 2 of Star Wars, and the first entry to the Harry Potter series. 12 physical volumes of my TMNT manga sat beside volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Dragon Ball Z. There was even a poster for the recently released TMNT TV anime by Studio Nappa in a frame as well. I've truly made it as a mangaka with that milestone. My editor, Asuka, was over the moon now that one of her mangakas finally got an anime adaptation for their series. In celebration, she took me out to one of Japan's most expensive sushi restaurants in Tokyo. The fool. I sure made her regret that decision when she got the bill. Safe to say, my career as a writer mangaka has been very successful so far. Now, all I needed was to get some movie adaptations for my books. I threw myself on my large L couch and turned on the 80-inch OLED television. The television opened to a news channel where a brown-haired newscaster with a purple top looked up from her stack of papers. A large black and red title sat in bold letters near the bottom. Shocking news. Why? Bloody tragedy at Corellia Junior High. Sources tell us that the middle school student who mauled her classmate, injuring him severely, is still on the run. No information on the attack has been offered as of yet. The newscaster said with a disturbed expression. The picture changed to a male student, but his face was hidden from view. Toga was always smiling and friendly. I can't believe she'd do something so brutal. The picture changed again to a scared girl, her face also hidden from view. I saw her. Toga. She stuck a straw into Sato's and sucked on it. It was like she was in a trance. I clicked off the television and sat up on my couch, my hands underneath my chin. Toga Himiko. She was one of the main antagonists from the original series. If left unchecked, Toga would one day be a member of the League of Villains, affiliated with the Vanguard Action Squad, and later becoming one of the 9 lieutenants of the Paranormal Liberation Front. Besides all her fancy titles and positions, Toga was also a girl who was mentally unstable due to the years of mental and possibly physical abuse from her parents due to her nature. She was a person who was pushed to her breaking point until she finally snapped and attacked her classmate. That child is a demon. That smile, so creepy. Stop it. Why can't you be a regular girl? Why can't you be normal? The words her parents said to Toga when she was a child must have left deep mental scars in her psyche. No wonder she went crazy. Now then. What do? I have 2 choices in front of me right now. Option 1, I do nothing and let things proceed like they would in canon. This would keep the timeline as close to the one in canon, giving me the edge when Shigaraki and the League start their shenanigans. Option 2, I start a search for Toga and help her go through her issues so she doesn't go down the road of villainy. While I'm not sure what happened to her at the end of the story, if it ever did end, with her status as a killer and a member of the League of Villains, I doubt she had a happy ending. I don't know. She may be more trouble than she's worth. I ran my fingers through my hair as I tried to make up my mind. Still, she would be a great constant stream of points. Coming to a decision, I stood up from my couch and walked out of my living room toward the back door. I slid the door open to step out into my back patio. Once outside, I looked up and whistled. Quickly, several of my crows flew down from their large birdhouse full of fruits, seeds, and corn to stand at attention before me. Standing in a neat, orderly line were Crow Gojo, Geto, Shoko, Mai, Yuji, Nobara, Mai, Miwa, Momo, Todo, Yuta, and Hikari. Alright, everyone. I have a job for you. Chapter 20, No. 20, Unwanted Attention. The morning sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over my home's courtyard. I stood at the center, my bare feet planted firmly on the cool dirt floor, the earthy scent of the surrounding trees filling the air. A heavy, scuffed punching bag hung on a steel pole in front of me. With each steady breath I took, I felt my curse energy course through my body. I began with a series of slow, deliberate movements, focusing on my several stances. Each pose was a dance of strength and balance, cultivating a connection between my body and the ground. The rhythm of my breath matched the flow of my motions, creating a zone-like state that brought me into the moment. As I transitioned from one stance to another, I visualized an ever-changing opponent before me. All for one, Shigaraki, Overhaul, 9, Wolfram, the Nomus, Muscular, and many more. With a sudden burst of energy, I launched into a series of punches and kicks, my limbs slicing through the air with precision. The sound of skin meeting the heavy bag echoed around me. Each satisfying thud motivated me to push harder and harder. Sweat began to bead on my forehead, but I welcomed the discomfort, knowing that each drop represented progress. After several hours of relentless practice, I finally paused, my shirtless body coated in a sheen of sweat. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. Feeling my heart rate slow, I sat cross-legged on the ground and continued to focus on my breathing, grounding myself in the stillness of meditation. Nida Arita's painkiller, Nanami Kento's ratio, Nishimiya Momo's tool manipulation, and Dagon's disaster tides were the 4 curse techniques I had managed to pull in the past 2 years, much to my dissatisfaction. Nida Arita's painkiller allows its user to stop existing injuries from getting any worse. Arata can't heal wounds, but he can stop bleeding and reduce the pain for anyone he applies it to. However, any injuries sustained after the technique's application are unaffected. A rather useful technique for a supportive role. It'll help me continue a fight without having to worry about any life-threatening injuries. Nanami Kento's ratio allows its user to use this technique to mark their target's body with lines divided into tenths. If the user is able to strike one of these lines on exactly the 7-to-3 ratio point, they deliver a critical hit to the subject. This allows them to deal significant damage on tougher adversaries and cleave weak opponents in 2 in a single hit. If used properly, ratio could be used to land critical hit after critical hit on an opponent. Not to mention the potential it had if combined with a black flash. It was exciting to think about. Nishimiya Momo's tool manipulation allows its user to freely manipulate a sorcerer's broomstick or tool by levitating it telepathically. Among other magic broom-related skills, this technique grants the user the ability to levitate on the tool or create gusts of powerful wind imbued with sea. What can I say about this technique? I didn't plan on moving around with a broomstick, so this technique was useless unless I could figure something else out for it. Finally, Dagon's disaster tides allows its user to manifest high volumes of water and control it using their sea. It is incredibly versatile, allowing for use in all ranges. It can be used as a water shield for close and mid-range and as a large, sweeping wave for long range. Having another curse technique from one of the disaster curses was a great addition. While Dagon didn't have the opportunity to show off all he could do like Jogo, I knew that with enough training, I could push this technique to greater heights. Just imagine a gigantic roaring tsunami coming your way. Definitely a promising technique. Even with all these new additions to my ever-growing list of curse techniques, I was still unsatisfied. Having the 10 shadows was not enough. I still needed the Limitless, Shrine, Star Rage, Sukuna's Sea Reserves, and the 6 Eyes. Not to mention, I haven't even gotten a single domain expansion as well. I'll even accept Takaba Fumiko's Comedian or Maodo's Idol Transfiguration at this point. Actually, I wouldn't mind Maodo's technique. I forgot how crazy strong it was. One touch, and I win. Talk about overpowered. Why was I so unlucky that I hadn't gotten any of the techniques or passives I actually wanted? Damn you, gacha gods. For skills and passives, I was able to pull Kenjaku's martial arts skills, Eiji Kayaka's barrier skills, and Fushiguro Toji's advanced perception. Kenjaku's martial arts skills were a wonderful addition to my already impressive martial arts repertoire. It has greatly increased my hand-to-hand proficiency to even greater peaks. After all, a sorcerer who had lived 1,000+ years has had a lot of time to learn almost every martial art ever created in his world. Eiji Kayaka's barrier skills were something I didn't know I needed until I had it. Barriers in the JJK world were used to conceal, contain, or deny entry to others within that space. Eiji, in particular, was a rather skilled barrier user who was trusted highly by Gojo Satoru himself. The man proved himself an asset when he used a barrier to conceal Gojo's hollow technique, purple, during his opening attack on Sukuna. Fushiguro Toji's advanced perception had heightened my 5 senses to their absolute peak. It's what allowed Toji to see cursed spirits even without see. Like Maki. There were only things he and she could see in the world. Changes in temperature and the shifts in density were things I could now see around me as well. It was a seriously broken passive. I was thankful to have won it with that diamond tier pull. All my other rewards were just more useless junk. I could essentially cosplay almost every character from JJK at this point. Still, I couldn't wait to wear the homeless, child support dodging fit. Gah. I opened my eyes to see that it was now pitch black. I turned to Zeiko and then to the star-filled sky with a nervous expression. Did I just meditate through the day again? I sighed and rubbed my face. Shit. Gah, Zeiko uttered and looked over at the two descending crows who quickly landed in front of me. Boss. Boss. Crow Yuji squeaked as he hopped onto my knee with Crow Nobara behind him. We found that human. Crow Nobara hopped beside Crow Yuji and pecked him on his wing, causing him to squeak. Gojo found the human, you dolt. Alright. So mean. Nov LB / JNN. Good work, you two. I stood up and lifted my arms to unwind my stiff joints. I then began to go through some stretches. Now then, let's go pick up a stray. XXX. General point of view. The laboratory was dimly lit, with flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows across the cold, sterile walls. The air was thick with an unsettling mix of chemical odors, a pungent reminder of the experiments conducted within. Rows of glass beakers and vials lined the cluttered countertops, some bubbling ominously with iridescent liquids while others were stained with dark, incomprehensible substances. In one corner, a large metal table stood, grimy and stained, adorned with surgical tools that glinted menacingly under the weak light. Charts and diagrams, filled with incomprehensible symbols, were pinned haphazardly to the walls, giving a sense of frantic research and obsession. A heavy metal door, slightly ajar, groaned occasionally as if it harbored secrets that it desperately tried to keep hidden. The faint sound of dripping water echoed in the background, punctuated by the unsettling hum of machinery that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Shadows danced along the walls, sometimes resembling figures peering out from the corners, evoking a sense of dread and anticipation. In this place, the line between genius and madness was blurred, and one could almost feel the presence of unrestrained ambition and evil lingering in the air, whispering of dark experiments waiting to be unleashed. Sukuna. What an interesting fellow. Sitting behind a computer within the lab was a man dressed in a suit whose face was entirely made up of scar tissue, extending from above his upper lip and covering his entire head and the back of his neck. As such, he had no visible nose, ears, hair, or eyes, though the outlines of his eye sockets were visible. Attached to his face and neck were several life-sustaining tubes and wires that stabbed themselves into his skin. Some would feel sorry for the sad state this man was in, but those who knew who he truly was would sooner run in terror. For this man was none other than All for One. Once Japan's most powerful villain. Unmatched by all. All, except for the symbol of peace himself, All Might. Who reduced him to the sad state he currently found himself in. A slow, intrigued smile grew on the disfigured man's face as he looked at the blurry image on his computer of a hooded figure with a long black and golden staff sitting over their shoulders as he seemingly flew through the air in a standing position as the moon hung in the starry sky. A quirk that allows you to control your own blood, swap places with small objects, great strength, high speeds, flight, a form of telekinesis, the ability to conjure both fire and water, masterful martial arts, and high-level weapons knowledge, and who knows what more. All for One said with an ever-growing sinister smile. You're like me. How very interesting indeed. XXX. General point of view. The paved streets glistened under the pale glow of the street lamps, casting long shadows that flickered in the night breeze. Toga Himiko kept her distance, just enough to remain unseen but close enough to keep the drunk salaryman in her sights. The man moved back and forth, swaying around due to his inebriation. His coat flared slightly as he trekked. Himiko was a fair-skinned girl with an attractive face. She had inward-tilting yellow eyes with thin, slit-like irises that resembled those of a cat. Her wide mouth had a somewhat feline appearance, as her canines were pointed and longer than her other teeth, giving her a vampiric look. Her loose, shoulder-length hair was a pale ash blonde, and two chin-length side bangs framed her face. With each step, her heart raced. The streets were nearly empty except for the occasional rustle of leaves and the hum of late-night traffic. Himiko followed the man into a dimly lit, narrow alley, its walls adorned with peeling posters and fading graffiti. The scent of damp earth mingled with something spicy, perhaps leftover food from a nearby restaurant. He paused at a corner, glancing over his shoulder. For a fleeting moment, she held her breath, pressing herself against the cool brick wall to blend into the shadows. The man seemed to scan the area, and she wondered if he could feel her presence. Shrugging, the man unbuckled his pants and pulled out his member to release himself on the wall before him with a long, satisfied sigh. Himiko's face grew into a wide, hungry smile as she gripped her dirty box cutter tightly. The man's back was turned to her. This was her chance. She walked around the corner where she hid behind, her dirty school uniform matted with dirt and dried blood. Her loose, crusty hair swayed as she approached the man with a blaring hunger in her stomach. As she took one step, she felt her legs shake from exhaustion, causing her to briefly pause. The several sleepless nights Himiko had gone through were beginning to affect her. But that would change soon. Himiko would finally have a taste of the glorious, delicious, beautiful, life-sustaining blood again. She couldn't wait. Her dear Sato's blood was so delicious, she couldn't wait for another taste. Blood was all she could think about. Not even her painful hunger or thirsty throat could distract her right now. Blood. Just a little. Just a tea taste. Himiko muttered as she and the man were only 3 meters apart. I'll just stab you a little bit. It'll only hurt for a second. Are you sure you want to do that? Once you start down that path, you won't be able to stop. Himiko and the pissing man spun to look at a hooded figure leaning against one of the walls in the alleyway with their hands in their jacket pockets, seemingly appearing out of thin air. The drunk man quickly buckled up his pants and turned back and forth to the hooded figure and Himiko. What the hell? Who the hell are you two? Get lost, you bozo. The hooded figure shooed the man away. And stop pissing in the streets. That's disgusting. Who the hell minus? Chunk. Both Himiko and the man blinked in confusion as a thick knife stabbed itself beside the drunk man's head, silencing him. Seeing the weapon, the man screamed in fright and ran out of the alleyway, leaving the hooded individual and Himiko alone. Sukuna pushed himself off the wall and approached Toga. Now then, Toga. Let's talk.